meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Shyann, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've really been looking forward to hearing your story and your perspective, not only as an adoptee who was raised by your grandmother, but as a foster mom of teen girls as well. So you've had a lot of hats that you have worn. And I recently saw, so this is where we're going to start, is I recently learned about your birth story. And would you be willing to share some of that with us?
Absolutely. So I was born into a broken family situation. My biological mother was actually homeless and a prostitute when I was conceived. So I have no idea who my father is. And so while she was pregnant with me, she was on the streets, homeless, doing God knows what while I was in her body. And when I was born, there was absolutely nothing wrong with me. So it's just so evident and clear, all of Psalms 139, how the Lord makes us fearfully and wonderfully made. And me being healthy and just fine just makes no sense to the life that she was living. But my grandmother, of course, my mom wasn't able to take care of me. So my grandmother adopted me. And she was currently married at the time. So my last name comes from my grandfather. So around when I was 4, my white side, and I just found out about this part last year, a few months ago, because she was in a domestic violent relationship with my grandfather for 30 years. But the real reason that they divorced was because of my skin color. And so I was about 4 when they got a divorce, and I was a daddy's girl. Like I remember like him holding me on his shoulders, and one day it was over and we drove away with all of our stuff. And I remember growing up, I would call his job and he would answer and hear my voice and hang up the phone. So I've never talked to him again since I was 4, but he would hear my voice. But he paid child support up until I was 21. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
That had to be pretty heavy to hear. How was that for you?
I've experienced a lot of trauma in my life, but I knew that race was a thing. Like growing up, I would still hear the N-word passed around, or I would overhear conversations like, we prefer her not to come to the family reunion because we don't want to make the older people feel sad for being kin to a Black person. But my grandmother is she didn't care. So we went anyway, and I remember getting all the stares. I remember I was standing in line like this, and an older lady like elbowed me out of line to get to food over here, but she elbowed me like that. And I remember sitting at a table by myself that day, eating family reunion food.
Wow. So, I'm so sorry. That's not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Definitely wasn't a reunion.
No. And you mentioned a little bit, you said your grandma didn't care, and you said that in a positive way. And you've said before, I saw as I was learning about you before this interview, your grandmother selflessly gave up her life so that you could have yours.
Yes, ma'am. She gave up her family. She gave up, well, they're better now, but at the time, family was distant. Her marriage, her family, So that was hard. And she comes from a family of altogether 18 brothers and sisters. And she's the baby. I know. And she's the baby. So.
Wow.
And,
I thought I had a big family. I have 7 children.
Wow.
18 children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So she's in her late 60s. And most of them are passed on. But.
So what did that mean to you when the realization of kind of all the things she gave up for you, did that settle in a certain way?
Mm-hmm. We have a weird relationship, but as I think about all that she's let go for me, it's just a humbling and just a sweet feeling to know that she's done that for me, and I just want to give the world to her.
That's very cool. That's really an example of Jesus.
Yes.
Jesus gave his life for us. Were there some specific ways that you can think of beyond? I mean, we've talked a little bit about, but any other ways that you can think of that you were like, wow, she sacrificed for me?
So when she was married, we were very wealthy. My grandfather owned. He would create boats, all kinds of stuff. So she has no college degree. She has no high school diploma. So we went from living really nice to coming to a different part of Mississippi and living in a trailer. And another part about me is my biological mom showed back up into my life maybe 2 or 3 times. And when I was 11, I can remember police cars pulling up. I was watching Dr. Phil, just got off the school bus, and cop cars pulled up, and I watched my grandmother fall to the ground, and really hectic. I seen like a death certificate of my biological mother, and so she committed suicide by standing in front of a train. So since, in Memphis, and killed herself. And a few months after that, they retrieved a lot of things that she had on her. So she also had like a learning disability, but she would write my name like a white piece of paper. She would write Shyann Lynn like all down the page. And I love looking back on that around Mother's Day. Like even in her life of struggles and pain, she would always, even though she probably felt like she's not the best mother, like she would always think about me in her life. So
you were known, you were remembered.
So I have all those papers that she would constantly write, and that was probably like a coping mechanism for her too.
Yeah.
But all of that to say, when my biological mom died, my grandmother became very depressed and let the house go. I don't want to get too graphic, but I lived in a very, I was bullied in school for smelling, and so just a lot of that. All of that occurred right after the death of my mom.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So you're a Christ follower now. You know Jesus. Like, when did he become real to you?
Yeah, my mom, my grandmother, I call her my mom. She's the mom that I know.
Okay.
So when I refer to my mom, it's my grandmother. But my mother would take us to church, but we were in and out. And growing up in Mississippi, we're just used to, you go to church on Sundays because that's the thing to do, but like your life doesn't reflect it. So I was on Twitter one day as the 16-year-old that I was, and I remember seeing like a lot of young people my age on fire for God, and I've never experienced nothing like that. So I remember being on a conference call, and I gave my life to the Lord through that, while also going through something that's a little friendship issues, and I just wanted to cling to this God who fixes everything. And I prayed the prayer of salvation, and it's just like, it was just this peace that just fell over me. And I remember praying, Lord, break my heart for what breaks yours, that night. And I experienced like having a dream from the Lord that showed like visions of children being trafficked in different countries and orphans. And since then, I've always been captivated by like the cause of sex trafficking. And then going back to that, like that's what my mom, like that's how I was conceived. So it's just so crazy how like God knit my whole story together when I feel like, God, why does my life have to look like this? But it's so cool how he truly knit me together in my mother's womb and laid my life out the way it is with all the pain.
Wow.
But look now what he's done.
Yeah. And with purpose, like you have it doesn't take away the pain. And I am so sorry for the pain you've experienced. You have experienced insurmountable amounts of pain that is not what anyone should have to experience. So I want to say that. And what to your point, it's also very clear that God has not wasted any of that. Yeah. Right? Like that he's put this deep passion in your heart for others who are experiencing pain. And you can relate in a way that other people who haven't gone through that can't, right? So how has that kind of lived out your life? Like how, at that passion, how have you lived that out?
So pertaining to foster care.
Yeah. And just, and girls who have been trafficked and just this desire to help others.
So when I first moved to Memphis 5 years ago, I started working at a nonprofit here in Memphis that services sex trafficking survivors. And the first 3 days of training were so incredibly hard. Like I would cry, but it was like also a way of healing. To know like this is all that my mom went through. Well, just a fraction of it. But it was I was there almost 3 years, and I loved serving ladies there who were survivors of trafficking. And also I remember there was a few ladies who would have been around my mom's age. So even more of a reason to just love them back to life, because my mom didn't have anyone to love her back to life. And she felt the only way out was to stand in front of a train. So I loved working there. Foster care, I wanted to start when I was 21, when I could, but I knew that I wasn't ready, but I really wanted to do this. So when I was 23, fresh out of college, had a full-time job, I wanted to do this. I knew that this is it. This is time. And in Memphis, there's a huge foster care community here. There's a lot of single women that do this. So I had a lot of mentors. So I started my home. I started out welcoming little children, but I realized, and then COVID hit right after that too. So I have a full-time job. I'm single. The family that I do have live 2 hours away and can barely help. Well, they help a lot, but not physically.
Right. They're far away.
And all of my friends they have a lot of foster kids. All that to say, I had little kids at first for probably the first 6 months. Then after that, I ventured off to teens. When I was taking a break, Miss Skelton, we need you for a 16-year-old tonight. And the calls happened every single day. So there was times when I had 7 girls in my house at one time, and people asked me how I did it. I don't know how I did it, but everything flowed. It really did flow. They needed a home. They needed safety. I also typed out my testimony, and I had it in the halls. I had it in the bathroom. I had it on their bunk beds. So if they were able to read, they read that along with storage filled with toiletries, socks, underwear, clothes, new luggage, because a lot of times their stuff comes in bags. And just to see that the dignity that they had from having new things was beautiful. But my testimony, it was like once they read it, it was like a layer fell off because they see someone like them and just question, but how did this happen? And you have people like you in your home, or you're happy. How are you happy? And then that was also a way to like talk about Jesus like this.
Yeah.
I definitely shouldn't be as happy as I am, but it's only because of his grace and mercy and just the gift of salvation and the relationship that I have with him. So I love that, putting my story out there, and it was their choice to read it and feel comforted and then also be led to Christ in a lot of situations because of that.
That's incredible. I think that's awesome that you just put it out there. You weren't pressuring, but you were like, this is me. This is, and I can totally see how it would take away a layer for them and break down a barrier.
They felt understood.
That's very awesome. Yeah. Yeah. What are some things that you have learned through this journey as you have cared for kids of all ages, but maybe particularly these teens?
I think the number one thing, I can't pour from an empty cup. So practicing self-care and falling in love with the things that I like to do and make time for that, whether that's being in nature or thrift shopping. I love thrifting. So even if that's walking around a thrift store, it just gives me what I need. But taking time for myself and learning to say no sometimes when I didn't have the capacity to take on anymore.
Which can be hard to do when you have a big heart
Very, very
and you want to
hard.
help people.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the need in Shelby County, it's insane. So I would get calls at 1 o'clock in the morning. A child fresh from the hospital, had nowhere to go. And they would come to me. I would say yes. And then the DCS worker would pick them up right before I go to work.
Wow.
And then they would go on to a foster home.
Wow. And so you were getting woken up in your sleep. And you're doing this all as a single woman. So there's no one there to like kind of share the load.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
But the girls are and were incredible. They cleaned up. They helped with meals. They showed that they really wanted to be there because they knew that I was only, what's the word? I wasn't a permanent home. I was operating my home as an emergency home, but I would bond and fall in love with so many girls. So I never sent them back off after. I maybe should have after 3 days, but they stayed until most stayed until they were reunified. I currently, my home is closed right now. I went through a hard season, a broken engagement. So I downsized, moved into a 1-bedroom apartment and just wanted to, just breathe. But I definitely want to do this again, but I needed to not pour from an empty cup.
That's absolutely right.
So I moved here in September, and in December, one of my former teams who I had was aging out on Christmas and had nowhere to go. So she's back here with me as well, and she's thriving and doing incredible and so ambitious.
Wow.
And I'm so proud of her. But so now I'm forced to just do one, and I can only do one and just invest in her little life while also taking care of myself.
Right. Which is important. Yeah. Would you say, Shyann, that you have experienced more of Jesus as you have stepped into this world of caring for other people?
I think so. I think God has given me, or just foster parents in general, a special gift to see people not for who they are. Like when I see a troubled teen, I see myself right through them. Like I don't see their actions. I see the trauma behind it. I'm seeing that broken child who just longs for to be held. And there were nights when some would have outbursts or something like that, and I would just stare at them and say, I see you. And they would break down. And a hug. So just the eyes that Jesus has given me to see past what's being shown in front of me is definitely him.
Yeah. And that is exactly how he sees us. Yeah. He doesn't see the behaviors, the attitudes, the actions. He sees the heart.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, I anything else that is just something that has like on your heart to share, that you have in mind, I want to give you an opportunity to share.
Well, I am currently transitioning to a new job at the end of the year called Isaiah 117 House, if you've heard of that. And it was created by a lady named Rhonda Paulson. So what the Isaiah 117 home is, it's just like my home, but I'm not, drowning in my, I'm not drowning.
That's positive.
Yes. I would be there on call, and also, so it's an emergency home for no more than 72 hours. So it alleviates the removal process of a child coming into custody. So when a child is taken into custody and the workers show up, they're forced to throw all that they have into a little sack and brought to the DCS office to sit in a cubicle for 2, 3, 4, 6, 12 hours. And from a lot of my girls' stories, a lot of them didn't eat unless a caseworker felt sorry for them and brought them food. So I'm so excited to be working with this new organization and helping bring it to Memphis. So just wanted to bring more awareness to Isaiah 117 House. If you have one in your area, to volunteer or something like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think, Shyann, the thing that I just so value about what you have shared today is just those 3 words, I see you. And reminding us that to look deeper, to look past the surface. Like that's our heart here at the Forgotten Initiative, is we want to help people see the foster care community as Jesus sees them. And that's how Jesus sees all of us as loved, right? As he knows us, he created us with a purpose. Just like your whole life has shown what Satan intended for evil, God has used for good. And not only in your life where I can see Jesus in you, I can see the light in your eyes, but I also see him working through you. And I think that's absolutely incredible. And I just want to encourage you to stay the course, keep taking care of yourself, get filled up, get refreshed, and then just keep going at it just like you're doing it. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on today, for sharing your experience and your perspective.
You're welcome.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.